Can you describe your improvising? I ask this question a lot, and I get a lot of different answers, but the thought process that happens when you're improvising?
At its best, and at the level I feel I'm at now, no thought. One should not be sitting there doing analytical thought when you're improvising. It's like language. You don't think about the next word you're going to say. You don't think about how to spell it or what that word is. You just say it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same for me at the piano, same for any musician worth their salt as a jazz musician. You think a phrase and you play that phrase. I don't think, gee, that's the third, that's the seventh of the chord, that's a dotted eighth, 16th, there's a whole rest here,
mm-hmm.
there's a half, there's all the technical things.
Yeah.
So understand what I mean, and I hearken to language, because in language you have to know how to conjugate, you have to know how to speak properly, how to get your ideas across in many different ways. You might say, I walked up the mountain, and you might say, I slowly walked up the mountain, and then I ran, and then I stopped, and I took a rest, I had a ham sandwich, and then I got to the top of the mountain.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of different ways to get there, and I know many, many different ways, just as you would in a conversation, but you don't think about it, you just think of what you want to express.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best analogy I can give for what happens when I'm improvising. Behind it is a great deal of knowledge and experience, and the ability to listen. That's the most important thing, is to listen to the players around you, or if you're playing solo, to listen to the air. Listen to the space, and listen to what the space needs. If it doesn't need anything, don't play anything. And it's something like that.
Wow. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Like that.
I could, of course, go into a very scholarly answer
Mm-hmm.
of we do this when we're playing on this form, and if I was teaching a lesson to a piano student, I would go into things like that. But I don't think that that's what it is finally about. It's finally about immediate expression of the idea.
Do you have to go through a certain amount of technical chordal scale knowledge to get to that point?
Scale knowledge, rhythmic knowledge, historical knowledge, everything, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You have to have a full toolbox, or you won't be able to build a house.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. You've been saying some things that particularly for the students in my class, I think are just absolutely marvelous, incredible. Because you talked about experiences. Not once have I heard you mention anything that's got to do with music theory.
Music and theory?
Yeah. It seems like the music comes from someplace much deeper than that.
Oh.
And then it eventually will involve your note choices.
You got to remember, Mike, excuse me for interjecting this, but you got to remember that years before people who gave vent to their feelings, years before they knew anything about theory, harmony, composition, counterpoint, etc., they gave vent to their feelings. And they were indulging in, for lack of a better title, they called it get off. This is long before the term improvisation was coined, or before it was in the dictionary pertaining to playing music, you know. They used to call it get off, which simply meant that the first course you played the melody, and thereafter you'd use the melody as a guide wire to simply superimpose extemporaneously a melody around this given melody. So that's what became get off. So you get off the melody. So even then, the guys were giving vent to their feelings and expressing themselves, and they would use certain things that would help them to get from point A to point B. First of all, the one thing that we teach our students today, and I'm sure you do too, regardless of how much theory, harmony, counterpoint, and composition they will, get in their brain, they got to know when to use it. They got to listen to when to use it, know how to use it. There's a zillion educated fools walking around the street today, heads loaded with something, they don't know how to use it, don't know where to use it, and when to use it. So this is a lesson that we try very hard to get our students to understand. Now, back in those days, they didn't know anything, as we mentioned, about these technical terms, and They had nobody around to teach them, but they were determined to give vent to their feelings and express themselves and get off. So what they do, they played the blues as the main vehicle. They played the blues, and if they played a standard tune, they played the standard tune, and then superimpose melody around it. But on the blues, they figured out a good way to give vent to their feelings is if somebody had the ingenuity, even without knowledge, to figure out that here's the tonic, that's the one, then you go up with the scale, 1, 2, 3, that's the third. They lower that a half step, bah, that's the minor third. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lower that half step, bah. So you got a tonic, a minor third, flatter fifth, and they didn't know then that it constituted a half diminished. They couldn't care less, you know. All they knew, they called them the blue notes. And they say, man, you got your blue notes? Yeah, baby, I got them down. I'm working on F sharp now, but I'm gonna have that tomorrow. But they refer to them as the blue notes. And right today, you take a class and you take your rhythm section, or if you just play bass line, tell them to play one note. Just play the time. Bob, two Dr. Blues. Boop, bob, dab, dab, any kind of rhythmic pattern they want. Do that, and then the next go tell them to take the two notes, the tonic and the minor. Do, 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 that. Then the next time, take the flat fifth and the minor third. Bang, do, that, do, that, do. Now you can't pick out no more beautiful and important notes in playing the blues than those three. Then you go into your seven, and pretty soon they reach the point where it's almost, we use it for discipline too. And all, just that one note, those two notes, or those three. Because after a while, they're going to begin to hear all of the relative notes that constitute the blues scale, you know. And then they're going to hear the four, they're going to hear the flat five. Some people call the augmented seven the flat six. They're going to hear the seven, the major seven, the nine, the flat nine, and the 13, and all of them, and they hear the whole scale then. But after a while, they're going to, for a period of time, they're going to be involved in playing those blue notes, the blue notes, the tonic, the minor third, and the flatter fifth, and they got it. And if you find a cat who's pretty well endowed in playing the blues with those three things in mind, you ever listen to his things, all these things?
Yeah. But you sing that thing you playing that bad.
And then any kind of rhythm pattern.
And while that's going on, another cat say, hey, let's do this thing over here.
Yeah. 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 And that's after a while they can hear all that, because then you got to.
Then you can take it, give it. That's the section. Give it to your brass band. You know,
hear all
the brass will play it muted though. And then blap, blap, blap.
Yeah, discrete, any kind of rhythmic pattern they want. False fingering, octaves, shakes, fall-offs, rips, darts, or whatever. A lot of things that are incorporated in the Italian dictionary we can't use in jazz. They don't express what we want. You wouldn't hardly say to a cat on the bandstand, let's play some Largo blues. There's some far more descriptive terminology that we use.
You know, it's funny because I said I've done these interviews. I've never been interviewed myself on this subject, so I don't, I'm just speaking off the top of my head. But, from my own experience, it's, the less thinking, the better, the more you feel like you're part of the whole group, and that the music is just kind of there. You're just sort of pulling it out of the air. The better you are. And I have that feeling when I write too, by the way, which is, is not that I am really creating it, but it's like the thing is there. It's like you talk about, Michelangelo with David. I mean, it's like, the stone is there, but he sees the thing. It's already in there. He just chips away to get at it. I mean, that's the way it always feels like when I'm writing. It's kind of like prospecting. It's like, the gold is there. It's, all these great compositions have never been written. They're all there. You just have to find them. It's not like, it doesn't feel like I'm the one that's doing it. It's just, somehow your taste or what you, something unconscious is deciding what's gold and what's not in there. But you're not really, I mean, that's the thing. You kind of have to have, I guess, some sort of, you know, discrimination, some kind of, you know, feeling for, well, this, you know, this does something to me and this doesn't. I think you have to have that kind of feeling to decide, because, you know, I mean, like what one person considers gold, another person might not. And that's kind of the beauty of it, because that's why everybody plays differently. But you have to have, I guess, that the important thing is to have that feeling that for some reason this really turns me on, you know, these notes, but these notes, you know, just don't leave me cold, or this rhythm or something like that. And it's that kind of, when it's working, it's kind of feeling like you're not really doing it yourself. It's not a conscious thing. It's just sort of, you know, it's just sort of there. You know, which is a pretty vague answer, I guess, but you know.
But I've heard it before, actually.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
To be a musician, you have to be, I think, super flexible. Because otherwise, how could you make it at all?
Yeah. See, and, you know,
How could you?
and also that coincides with, even though they coined that phrase jazz and, you know, refer to improvisation, you know, the act of improving on something, right? Improvisation, that's what it is. That's what I explain to my kids, you see. I said, everybody does that on this planet. Because nobody knows everything. So living life is a total improvisational experience. And those who try to fix it so it's like 1, 2, 3 are, you know, eventually find out it doesn't work 1, 2, 3 all the time, you see. You know, they got to deal with the law of permutation.
Do you find that some of your students have more success simply because of their personalities, that they're more easygoing or willing to take chances?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because that's that freedom you speak about in terms of personal expression, again, you see.
You have to be fearless.
Yes, yes.
And that comes from having confidence.
Really, you know.
And I think I don't think you could teach anybody that. I think a lot of their early life experiences with their folks and maybe even before they're born,
The only,
I think has a heck of a
yeah,
lot
it's true.
to really deal with that. Because most real fearful people, they can accomplish a lot in another direction, but I don't think they can be a musician, not a jazz musician, and
No,
be
no.
that fearful.
No,
It has something also to do with faith.
that's it.
You know, like someplace, somewhere, somebody need a good band.
Yeah,
Because you just have to feel like tomorrow's gonna be okay.
yeah.
And then there comes the other side, like you go up that mountain, and you go along, you're on the road, and you think you're next to the gigs and whatever. Then you get to a point in everybody's life where you start feeling, I don't know if I can do that. And a lot of it has to do with the physical body, if they're taking care of it, or
Yeah.
all of a sudden they get a little twinge here or there. And they start losing that faith. And that's when you see them putting the horns in the bed, behind the bed, or in the closet, and try to find something else to do. Now, I tell you, in my experience, I found that to be a crucible for every musician. I don't care whether he's classical or gospel or jazz musician. There comes a time when you have to decide whether you're going to really continue.
As a parting question, if you had a word of wisdom to give to students that you know be watching this tape, students trying to make their way in the professional jazz and understand the idiom, just a parting shot.
Yeah, I think I have something pertinent to say. I would advise them that in their practicing, as they're playing scales and as they're playing exercises and trying to improve their technique, I would take about 25 or 30% of that time, or a margin of that practice time, and use it to study songs. And go out and buy sheet music, not just lead sheets with the chord symbols, but shell out the bucks that it takes and go out and buy Cole Porter songs and go out and buy George Gershwin songs, you know, and look at them and look at the piano parts, even if you don't play piano. And it takes forever, I mean, if you're not a piano player, but it's worth the effort to sit at a keyboard and hear how those inner voices move, you know. And if you spent, or if the student spent a little bit of his time, his practice time doing that, analyzing these songs by these great songwriters, he'd learn how to construct a line, because after all, these are great composers, you know. And what we're trying to do in jazz, ostensibly, is to compose. Even though we're composing spontaneously.
Instant composition.
We're trying to compose. And I think what better way to learn to compose than examining music by a great composer, you know. So not only would you profit from that knowledge that you can gain by analyzing this music, but also you'll learn these great songs that people like to hear played. I've said this before too. I tell students this. One student said, "Well, Mr. Barrett, this is all well and good, but when are we going to get into the Lydian modes and all that?" And I said, "Well," I said, "you know, somebody else can teach you that better than I can." And I said, I think any knowledge is good. And I said, it'd probably benefit you greatly to know about that. But I said, I'll tell you something. Playing in clubs, I've received $5 here and there to play Body and Soul, and I've received $10 tips to play Stardust, and I've gotten a couple bucks to play Shanty and Old Shantytown for people. I said, I don't think I've ever made a dime to play a Lydian mode for anybody, you know? No one has ever come up and requested a Dorian mode or a Lydian mode, you know? So it's great to know about that stuff, but I think you'd be better off, you know, I'm addressing the students now. I think you would be much better off and stand a much greater chance to make a living in a fairly competitive business if you learn these songs and learn them correctly and could play them so you make people happy.
That's wonderful.
All right.
Thank you.
This is from your recent. When you ask a horn player what he thinks about when he improvises, you might get a certain answer. Is there an answer from a vocalist that you think might be different?
I don't know, but I would say that when I am, it has a lot to do with what the song is about for me. You know, I know in working with different musicians, I did an album called The Grand Encounter, and I remember anytime we did a song, the musicians would always say, now what are the lyrics to this song? They always want to know the lyrics to the song so that they could, you know, really tell the in a way without words. And that's basically kind of how I think when I'm, you know, Lullaby of Birdland is, I think for me, more than anything, it's nostalgia, because when I first heard the song, I remember where I was, who I was, how young I was, and what an impact it made on me. And I think that, you know, when I'm singing, I'm thinking about, wow, I wish if I were in that session, how it would be, what I would do, and I guess that's what that was.
Yeah. Do you find that you would change your choice of syllables and sounds depending on what kind of music you're scatting over?
It really has a lot to do with placement of pitches and sound. And I always look at improvisation, at least for me, as, you know, the words that you can't say, the things that come out of your soul. And any song that I sing, I'll change the sound or the timbre in my voice to fit what it is that I'm trying to say. So that probably is true with improvisation as well.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about one of your incredible skills, and that is when you're singing a lyric and when you're scat singing, you seem to be able to go back and forth between the coloration of the word and between a scat symbol. with such unbelievable ease. When did you know you had such a skill? How do you practice something that is that spontaneous and that creative? How do you perfect that?
Wow, I've never been asked that. I really think that it goes back to just the experience of being in these different settings with different bands and musicians that are really, really great at what they do, and always feeling more comfortable being hungry. I always feel comfortable being hungry. So I put myself in positions that are, I don't know, kind of scary, that make you dig really deep and find things. And I believe that for me, improvisation is my soul utterance. So whatever I'm singing in the lyrics, whatever I improvise, they're kind of one and the same. And I think just throughout the years of constantly doing this, early on, I remember the longest time on stage for me was between songs, because I didn't know how to speak to an audience. And I didn't want to just like introduce the next song, but I needed something to do between the songs so that I just didn't feel like I was naked in front of the audience. And so what happened was these vamps on the end of songs. And from that came the storytelling. And I think that's where all the my way of improvising came into being, telling the stories. I could sing it, but I couldn't say it, so I would always sing over the top of it. So it kind of came from, like I said, experience, purely experience, having the opportunity night after night, going out there and finding something in myself that I didn't know existed.
You say you could sing it, but you couldn't say it.
Then, yeah, I can say it now, but then I couldn't.
So, yeah, I mean, so, you know, I think that jazz is a great art when it's, you know, I mean, the endeavor certainly is a, of course, it's a difficult music. It relies heavily on improvisation, which is very difficult because everybody doesn't do that well. The name of the game is to do that. But because you're dealing with the spontaneity, that's what can make it difficult and not sound so good sometimes. So to pull it off, you have to be extra. You have to be something, you know?
Yeah.
To pull it off.
If you play a tune, if you're playing on All the Things You Are, have you internalized that tune enough over the years that you don't have to think about this 2-5-1 and that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much all music. You know, you have to do that when you're maybe learning a tune. But then once the tune is committed to memory, the form, the structure, and the elements that make the tune what it is, I don't think any real pro that's been playing for a number of years really thinks about that. It's pretty much like when you get ready to talk, you don't really say, I'm saying an infinitive. I'm saying this is a verb, this is an adjective phrase. You don't really say that. You just need to say whatever it is you want to say, and then you try to do it. And you do it, you know. So it's pretty much the same way.
I like that analogy. Do you teach?
Yeah, well, I've done it. I have.
You have taught, and I'm wondering if that's something that would be really important to pass on to a student, that not to neglect learning songs really well, because all the theory will not come into play until you know the song.
Right. Yes. You have to know the literature that you're dealing with. So, I mean, it's just like anything else. You might go to school for journalism or for whatever, or for what he's doing. It doesn't make any difference what it is. You have two dimensions to conquer. You have the physical dimension, or the physical media, that you're dealing with, whether it's music, if it's writing, if it's, it doesn't make any difference. There's a certain thing that has to be overcome. You have to get the professionalism and the command over whatever medium it is. And then after that's done, then that's not really the real main event. The main event is, what do you do with that now? What kind of pictures do you take? What kind of story? You can go to school and learn how to write, but okay, now after you know the elements of how to write a short story, long story, essay, this and that, all right, you know mechanically what to do, when, where, you know this is supposed to unfold in this manner and climax here and this here. But now, that doesn't mean you're going to be a great writer. Just means you know the elements of writing, you know.
Yeah.
It's the same way with music. You can learn 2-5-1s, chords, and yes, you should learn that, and you will learn it, you know, and you do learn it. But that doesn't mean you're going to be a great soloist. It doesn't mean you're going to be a great artist. Doesn't mean any of that, because there's another aspect of all of that. It has nothing to do with the physicality or the medium through which you're dealing with. It's got something to do with all that other stuff, all that abstract stuff that you can't hold or touch, that you can't, there's no way in school they can show you. You know, they can, you know, you can learn facts, figures, and knowledge, but discrimination and wisdom cannot be taught.
Is it possible to verbalize what you think about on any particular tune while you're playing?
No, I don't know. These things come to you automatically. I mean, sometimes, usually if I'm going to play something while someone else is playing, I'll try to think of something that I would like to introduce my solo with, something that's relative to the quality, the nature of the piece itself, and something that fits kind of harmonically with what's going on. And I usually try to think about that. And I also think it's just improvisation is, it's like giving a speech or something like that. You have a subject, and your interpretation of it may differ from mine, but it's still basically the same subject. So that's the theme that you're improvising around, and you try to play something that enhances it, and also adds a little different flavor to it. So you don't come in and play exactly what the person before you. You may even extract some of what he played as a lead-in to what you're going to do, you know, and so you get that dovetailing. It's like passing the baton in a relay race. You do it smoothly, you know. You don't do this. You're running and you pick up the same speed as that person whom you're going to accept the baton for or pass it to, and you get that smooth transition, you know. That's if you listen to a lot of improvisation in different groups, when they have that smooth transference from one to the other, that's the way it does. That's the way it comes off.
Yeah, I like that analogy. If you took any particular standard that you feel comfortable playing with, do you have those sequence of chords memorized in your head?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. But not always.
Not always.
But you can still negotiate your way through them.
Right, right. There's some pieces that are a little difficult to come up with something when you're improvising. It's kind of hard to think of something that works pretty well. So sometimes you'll have something in your head that you knew worked once before, and you use that as a platform to start off from, you know. I was just trying to think of something. I'll think of some tune that in particular.
Well, I noticed just before I turned this tape off that when you got to the bridge of the song, you started playing ba ba da 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 until maybe you thought of something else to do.
Right.
I mean, that's an assumption on my part.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with playing a bit of the melody
here
and there and you're improvising.
So at least we know where we're coming from with it.
But by and large, my association was with Joe Viola. He was the head of the woodwind department there, and my goodness, I studied with him for a long, long time. Long apprenticeship.
Was he did he use the keyboard to teach you improvising? I've always been curious as how people teach improvising if they don't provide some kind of harmonic setup for you to play against.
we would work on improvising, but he didn't teach me per se. He gave me the tools for learning how to do it. But he used to play the chords. He used to plunk out the chords on the piano, and I'd blow some choruses on various, standard tunes, things like that. But learning how to improvise, that's something you learn how to do it on your own. Nobody teaches you how to do it. They just sort of create the settings for you to experiment in. And I think Joe approached it that way. And he gave me the tools for trying to hear and reach the things that I wanted to be able to play.
This is a tough question, I think, but I've often liked to see if I can tell what people think about when they improvise. Are you conscious, to a great degree, of the changes as they go by, or is it a little more esoteric than that?
Well, here's the way. I'm not entirely sure. When I study a piece of music that has important harmonic material in it, I internalize it. I think this is how a lot of jazz musicians would describe the process to you, but I play it over and over and over again, both on the horn and on the piano, until the coloristic changes that are in the tune aren't symbols on a page anymore. They're inside. I can hear them in their fullness, in their harmonic fullness, where they exist in a structure. And if I've succeeded in really learning that tune, the page goes away, and the tune is then inside me. And occasionally, I may have the chart in front of me, and you use those symbols, the chord symbols, as little reminders of what's going on. But like I said, I think if you really know the tune, the harmony is inside you, and also I think the melody is on some unconscious level being sung in my head when I'm playing. It's there. It's inside. And I think that's some kind of guidepost that exists in your musical imagination at some deep level. That I don't know, it's hard to talk about this stuff, but I have a sense that that's what it's about. Because when I'm trying to teach students and things about it, that's the way I describe it to them.
I told you it was a tough question.
It is.
It's hard to talk about it, but in fact, a couple of things you've said right now, I saw yesterday when you were working with some of the students, in that while they were soloing, you decided to play the melody of the tune behind them.
Right, to help them.
To help them feel their way through the song.
It's kind of like putting on training wheels. You just, here it is, remember, and let them just dance on top of it to help them remember where the structure is.
Right. You had mentioned yesterday, I heard you talking about how you feel it's really important for teachers, jazz teachers, to be seasoned performers when possible. Do you think that there's stuff about jazz education today that doesn't follow that?
I'm a bad one to talk to about jazz education, because it's not really my métier, to even know exactly what's going on. My sense is that because I was an experiential learner and because I know what I know, with the guidance and input of a lot of theory and things like that, but I know that I learned what I learned by doing. So that's kind of my slant on what it takes to be a player. So I haven't really been in the jazz education environment that much. My path has not been as a teacher so far in the 20 years I've been out there. I'll do the occasional master classes and things like that, but my path has really been as a performer. So I hope I have something to give, from that experience. It's a little bit different.
Did you ever have an experience where you got into like almost an old-fashioned cutting session?
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Like I was saying to the students yesterday, I don't believe that jazz is a contact sport, you know. You know, that students should be, you know, frightened into how difficult it is to learn how to play jazz. Yes, it's difficult, but it's a beautiful experience if you have this passion for this thing and when you share it with other people. So, yeah, you know, there's good, healthy amount of ability in all of us as players, and we put it out there for people to see, you know, at times. But I don't believe the most constructive musical settings come about because people are cutting each other on a bandstand.
Right.
I mean, it's more like a sports spectacle than it is a musical endeavor, you know.
Yeah, right. If we had a nice grand piano sitting right here, and you sat down to improvise with no preconceptions in mind, how do you start? Is there something you decide to do to get started?
Usually what I try to do is to get out of the way. If I know I'm going to have to play, I get ready for a concert. Usually what I try to do is to find a way to clear my mind of other concerns. Sometimes that will involve me getting off by myself for a few minutes before I go up on the stand. And if I'm worrying about where did I put my plane ticket, and did I call this guy, and what time is that gig tomorrow night? I try to gentle myself out of those concerns. And one of the ways that works best for me is an internal reminder to remind myself how profoundly grateful I am to be able to play. That there is something about that moves me so much. I mean, even to say that brings tears to my eyes. It's like, I do feel so profoundly grateful to have music in my life that when I remind myself about this, the rest of these concerns just, they recede. And then I feel I'm ready to just greet music. And so if I then go out on the stage and there's just a piano there and myself, I just sit down and I just wait for something to happen. And something happens. You know, there'll be, some phrase will occur, will just play itself. And then I'm just playing. And then I just stay out of the way. I try not to manipulate the music. I try to honor it, to just listen to it. Where does this music want to go now? What am I hearing? And if I play a note or a chord or a phrase that contains something other than I was thinking about, an error in terms of where I was going, I try not to beat up on myself and start castigating myself. Oh, schmuck, what a dumb note to play. Because you start doing that, and then that messes up the next 4 notes or the next 4 phrases, then you beat yourself up for that, and that could start a real downward spiral in the music. So I think over the years I've gotten better and better at being just graceful with that. Just, I heard it. Sometimes you make wonderful lemonade out of a lemon. You can take that mistake, turn it on its ear, do something very interesting with it, so that, and you talk to a lot of jazz musicians, and a lot of them will tell you they've come to love their mistakes on record, because it really pulled them into something different.
Right.
They had to react in a different way to either legitimize it or to work with it or do something with that clam that appeared in the line. You know? So that's really ideally what my emotional state would be. Now, being human, I still have moments where thoughts intrude, get in the way. I'll be playing and I might be thinking about something else, and I'll have to become aware that those thoughts have become intrusive and gently push them away, focus more purely on the music.
Wow.
You know, if somebody coughs in the audience, rather than seizing on that and getting angry at the coughing, or
to not even hear it. It just goes over one's shoulder.
Does it help or hinder to think of the obvious places you could go? If you happen to land on a certain ninth chord, and in your head you know the conventional place for this to go is here, does that even enter your mind? And if so, do you try to ignore it, or?
I'm not really typically, when I'm playing, thinking about, ooh, here's a C minor ninth, which normally would resolve to. I'm not thinking that way at all. I'm having synesthetic experiences where I'm tasting the music, or musics have colors. Different scales and keys have different colors for me, and I'm playing and I'm hearing the blue and the orange together, and it tastes kind of salty and rough, and I'm sort of awash in a lot of different sense impressions, and I'm just trying to follow what feels most authentic. Again, the idea of where does the music want to go? Not where I want to put it, but where does this music organically want to evolve? That's what I'm hoping to allow happen.
It's a tall order.
I wish I could do it in a higher percentage of the time, but
but
that's what makes it interesting.
Yes, right.
You know?
No one ever said it was going to be easy.
Right. I mean, that's the challenge of this thing, you know.